Operation Mockingbird gets exposed about CIA in the media. That's when Operation Chaos gets exposed about the CIA infiltrating student groups on college campuses. That's when MK Ultra gets exposed with CIA and messing around with mind control and behavioral influence. That's when really everybody in society begins looking at their own institutional ties to this.
But one of the things you keep pointing out is like everything comes back to Iran-Contra. Everything comes back to Iran-Contra. So we throw around this term around. We throw it around online all the time, Iran-Contra. A lot of people out there obviously know the basics of what it is. But what I would love to start off with today is a full history of like, here's the documentary, here's what happened with Iran-Contra, and then we'll paint back everything that you're painting back to it.
Yeah. The reason I always come back to Iran-Contra, even for things that happened before, like Tulsi just dropped this 230,000 documents around the Martin Luther King assassination, which was in 1968. Iran-Contra wasn't until 1981 to 1988. But it's the reason I always come back to Iran-Contra and why I think that everybody should really do a study of it is because it's the way to understand how intelligence work got structured after the first set of real reforms to the CIA. And we've been living in the shadow of the structure of Iran-Contra ever since. So you had the CIA get born in 1947 under the National Security Act. And from 1947 until 1975, it had a free ride. It could do pretty much anything. There was no real oversight. There was no Senate Select Committee. There was no Senate Intelligence Committee. There was no House Intelligence Committee. You didn't need to get written sign-off to do a covert action through a presidential finding. It could get away with literal murder. I mean, it could literally go and assassinate people with a heart attack gun. If you go back and go to YouTube and put on the Frank Church holding up the heart attack gun with James Jesus Angleton and Colby, the CIA director, I mean, they could literally get away with murder, and they were also very sloppy during this period. From the 1940s to the 1970s, the traditional way that the CIA would move would be through the creation of what they called CIA proprietaries, which was when the CIA both funded an organization and then directed or controlled it. And what happened in the mid-1970s, in the run-up to the Jimmy Carter administration, things came to a head because the CIA had been messing around so much with the anti-war side of the Democrat Party, which was becoming more and more ascendant during the Vietnam War, which was basically 55 to 75. As that war is getting more and more scandalized and there's more and more heat on the CIA, things come to a head with these Church and Pike committees in Congress, which turn up all the dirt on the CIA. That's when Operation Mockingbird gets exposed about CIA in the media. That's when Operation Chaos gets exposed about the CIA infiltrating student groups on college campuses. That's when MK Ultra gets exposed with CIA and messing around with mind control and behavioral influence. That's when really everybody in society begins looking at their own institutional ties to this cloak and dagger spy agency, the universities, the unions, all the way down to the teachers' unions. The CIA was paying the National Education Association $1 million to tilt their policy and whatnot. These institutions are still around today. But what happened beginning in 75, 76, and then when Carter gets elected in 76, is their handcuffs put on direct CIA activity. And so everything would require a presidential finding for every covert action. So the president had to approve of it, and that also meant that the president was therefore responsible. The whole plausible deniability cloak that the CIA had since 1948 began to get very messy when you had to have written sign-off for all of the activity. And the fact that there was now so much oversight of it made it hard to be plausible, to keep plausible deniability. And so the CIA had to change the way it moved in order to maintain plausible deniability. And it moved into the NGO layer and into the outside financier layer from the 70s into the early 80s. When Jimmy Carter became president, a lot of people think back of Jimmy Carter, especially in the Republican spaces, like the weakest president of the modern times. He completely decimated the CIA's traditional capabilities. He did something called the Halloween Massacre. which fired 30% of the entire operations division of the CIA in a single day, crippled their budget, swore off all different categories of covert action. And it was also during this period that the U.S. lost control of Iran. In 1979, there was the Iranian Revolution. Of course, there was the Iran hostage situation, which sort of gave rise to Ronald Reagan winning in 1980. And so you had these Democrats, and it's funny how this is sort of flipped in the modern era, because you have now much more anti-war voices on the GOP side than on the DNC side. But in the early 1980s, you still had the Democrats in control of Congress, but you had this Republican president, and they wanted to do certain types of foreign policy that the Democrats disagreed with. In particular, there was, getting to Iran-Contra now, in Iran-Contra, you had two different, the Contras refer to Nicaragua, and the Contra rebel faction that was being backed by the Reagan White House to topple the Sandinista government. That was sort of the left wing seen as Marxist. And so you had the 1979 revolution in Iran, which made it illegal to sell arms to Iran because of the arms embargo. And then Democrats in the early 1980s passed something called the Boland Amendment, which prohibited any U.S. government money from going to the Contras in Nicaragua. So
What year was that again? I'm sorry.
this is in the early night. This is 1981.
Okay.
So the Democrats say you can't fund you can't fund the Contras in Nicaragua, and also you can't sell weapons to Iran because of the arms embargo. So you had these two different illegal things that were banned by Congress, which is supposed to hold the executive branch to account. But you had a executive branch that wanted to do it anyway, so they had to find a way to get creative. And this starting point, I think, is very useful to understand how the intelligence apparatus moves when it knows it's not supposed to do something, but believes that it can creatively find a way to do it anyway. So what happened in the early 1980s is they said, okay, we can't get U.S. aid money to fund the Nicaraguan Contras. We can't get Pentagon money. We can't get State Department money. We can't get CIA money. How do we still make sure that the Contras have a chance at overthrowing the Sandinista government? And what they worked out was a scheme. In 1980, the Iraq-Iran War broke out, 1980 to 1988. And this was when Saddam Hussein's Iraq wanted to, saw the weakness of this new Iranian government that had just taken power in 1979. The Iraqis outnumbered the Iranians by 2-1 in terms of their military, and thought that they could just sweep into Iran and take over huge portions of it. So Iraq launches this attack on Iran, and you would think, given that the U.S., Israel, UK all wanted the Iranian government toppled, that would be something that we would be supportive of. But there were tensions because we didn't want Iraq to have regional hegemony there. We had a very schizophrenic foreign policy during the Iran-Iraq War, because I think it was Kissinger who quipped, I only wish there was a way that both sides could lose. And so even though we wanted the Iranian regime toppled and weakened, we didn't want Iraq to move in and take it over.
Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.